Live from Washington, D.C., this is Balance of Power with Joe Mathieu and Kaylee Lines.
Inflation is stuck. Welcome to the Wednesday edition with data showing inflation holding at elevated levels as economic growth is unchanged. And the market now trying to figure out what it all means for Jackson Hole at the end of this week. I'm Joe Mathieu, alongside Tyler Kendall in for Kaylee Lines today in Washington. Tyler, it's great to have you along. This is all boosting the Fed's case for keeping rates unchanged, and that seems to be the way the market's looking at this.
Right. Headline PCE and core PCE stayed unchanged, but we also have to keep in mind that we saw consumer spending slow. So maybe there's going to be two sides here when it comes to the doves and the hawks, and we wait to hear what the Fed chair, Kevin Warsh, has to say this Friday.
Yeah, that's for sure. We're going to be putting some good voices on this over the course of our hour, beginning with Liz Pancotti, the economist at Groundwork Collaborative, and we'll play it to the panel as well, because this all comes back to the issue of affordability, Tyler, that you and I talk about every day, whether you're on the White House lawn or here in the studio. Right,
the number one issue. We are now 10 weeks away from the midterm elections. I would ask who is counting, but I know that you and I are both counting here. There's a few different headwinds that are happening, including the renewed trade conflict with Canada, and also the fact that the U.S. is ramping up the economic pressure when it comes to Iran.
That's right. We'll have a lot more on that as we make our way through the hour here, and we have to remember that this market is kind of holding its breath after getting through the economic data this morning, Tyler. We've got Nvidia earnings, plus Salesforce, plus CrowdStrike, but the granddaddy of them all is Nvidia, and we've been watching the stock throughout the day here. We might not see a lot of movement until after 4.
Right, so let's get to it and see where we stand right now. For that, we're going to check in with Charlie Pellet at World Headquarters in New York. Hey, Charlie.
Hi, thank you very much, Tyler Kendall. Yes, Nvidia shares trading lower right now, down 1.5%. Going to be all over those numbers as they cross shortly after 4 o'clock Wall Street time. Complete coverage on Bloomberg television and radio. Again, Nvidia ahead of earnings, down by 1.5%. And as Joe mentioned, two other key reports, CrowdStrike and Salesforce. We'll have those for you as well after the close of trading. Right now we got stocks lower. We're off session lows, but bottom line here, basically treading water with the S&P down 10, 76.66 now, down 0.1%. Dow Industrials down 154 on the Dow, decline there of just about 0.3%. Nasdaq Composite Index down 0.3%, and the SOX, the Philadelphia Stock Exchange Semiconductor Index, down 0.2%. 2-year at 4.22%, the 10-year ahead of Kevin Warsh Friday, 4.66%, and the 30-year 5.18%. Spot gold 45.91 the ounce, down 1.4%. West Texas Intermediate crude turning around, moving higher. Oil advancing on supply concerns as Russia moves to escalate its war. Right now we got WTI up 0.5%, 82.76 a barrel. Brent 88.68 up by 0.1%. A story we've been all over: Meta Platforms. The stock is gaining on a down day for much of the market. Meta Platforms up now by 1.1%. It has agreed to pay up to $18 billion to settle a landmark social media case with multiple states around the country. Actor Tim Curry has died. He was 80, perhaps best known for his iconic role as Dr. Frank N. Furter in the Rocky Horror Picture Show, a college staple. Joe and Tyler, that is on Bloomberg Business Flash.
Tim Curry. I'm just hearing this, Charlie. Incredible.
That's why you keep it locked into Bloomberg, Joe Mathieu. We keep you up to date on markets and celebrity deaths.
Oh, God. That's Bloomberg right there. Charlie, I don't know how he does it. It's the market headlines. It's the breaking news. No matter what happens, Charlie's on it, and he'll be back in about 20 minutes' time with another read on the markets here. All winding up to Nvidia after the bell. Yep, you heard us mention it, and we'll say it a lot more times between now and then, with potentially the near-term direction for the entire market hinged off a single quarterly earnings report. Thanks for being with us here on the Wednesday edition of Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio, alongside Tyler Kendall. I'm Joe Mathieu in Washington. As we dissect the data, if there's any point to it, we're in a world here where everyone's so obsessed with Jackson Hole at the end of the week that, well, of course, they're parsing through each data point, but then again, no one knows how to react to it because we're all waiting for the Fed chair to speak on Friday. Yields are moving a little bit. Long bond up a couple ticks, 5.18 on the 30-year. The 10-year's at 4.66, up 4 ticks. The 2-year 4.22. Everyone's been talking about the 30-year mortgage, 6.7%, and when this is all going to break. You can make the argument, Tyler, that this data reinforces the Fed's view that it can keep rates unchanged for the foreseeable future.
Right. There's a lot that, as you're outlining, we're going to need to parse through here. But then the other side are those questions about what the future of the economy's growth is going to look like, and in particular, consumer spending, and whether or not we're seeing in this data what is perhaps a front loading from the World Cup a couple of months ago, or if this is a more durable slowdown. So there's a lot of that we need to parse through. But you're right, it's all leading up until Friday. And what is Kevin Warsh going to say to reassure investors?
If anything. There are two camps on this, it seems. One is nothing burger. It doesn't make any news, which is sometimes the Fed chair's job. Or does he need to lay down a marker and make a very stern point for this market that he is here to fight inflation? We remember how that went last time, and I bet Liz Pancotti does as well. Great to have her back. Vice President, Policy, Advocacy, and Research at the Groundwork Collaborative. Liz, it's good to see you. I'd also throw another item on this whole story, and that's a $40 trillion federal debt. How do you compile all this data and concerns about our fiscal straits with your eyes on Jackson Hole on Friday?
I think both with our eyes on Jackson Hole from potentially a Fed chair who is going to be quite silent, combined with Congress, who seems more interested in blowing a hole in our revenue streams than in plugging them together, the economy doesn't look so great right now. I think the big question for Kevin Warsh is how he plans to use the couple of tools the Fed has to actually fight the inflation that we're seeing as the president, adds additional tariffs on Canada, sanctions on Iran. We know that interest rates as a blunt instrument are really not one that can bring down that type of sticky inflation coupled with rising oil prices, given his conflict in the Middle East. I think, though Kevin's hands might be tied on the Fed's tools in the wake of the data that we're seeing, his lips seem to be sealed as well, which doesn't give a lot of confidence to markets at this point.
Liz, what is the biggest upside risk to inflation over the next 3 to 6 months? Shelter, wages, you mentioned this now, renewed trade conflict with Canada, and also the fact that we are still seeing those tensions in the Middle East.
My big concern is that, I think we had this exact conversation in February or March where we said, if the war in Iran comes to a close here in the next 6 weeks, 8 weeks, we won't see sustained price pressures from the war. We are now 6 months into that war. There is no durable end in sight. Whatever the ceasefire talks are, if they're happening, they aren't sticking. So I think that pressure is here to stay, and we are certainly going to see those effects flow into plastics, fertilizers, and groceries over the coming year, just as all of that works out, even if the war ended tomorrow. And I think on top of that, with the president threatening additional tariffs on Canada here in the next 10 days, at the start of 2027, and then with those additional targeted sectoral investigations still on at USTR, consumers or businesses have any reason to believe that relief from tariffs is on the way. And so those are the two biggest upside risks to inflation.
Well, okay, Liz, with that answer, then how could the Fed avoid raising interest rates at some point in the months ahead?
I think the big question is how much do they care about the labor market? And Kevin Warsh basically, to the extent he said anything since taking office, he said that American workers really aren't his concern. His bigger concern is bringing down inflation, though he's hesitant to increase rates given, whatever promises he made in the interview process with President Trump. And I think as a result, what we're likely to see is paychecks that continue to shrink and prices that continue to rise. And if you're a business trying to navigate this environment, it's impossible to make long-term decisions like hiring or CapEx investments unless you're a data center, which is driving about 60% of GDP growth in this morning's report.
Wow.
Well, let's maybe pick up on data centers and maybe also Nvidia's earnings today, too, and how much that is going to tell us about the AI investment cycle. What are you watching for, Liz?
I think actually the thing that I'm most concerned about is the inflation we're seeing from all of this data center build out. I really worry that we are headed back into the chips crisis that we saw in 22 and 23, where we simply don't have enough of the memory chips we need to serve things like consumer electronics, autos, et cetera. Plus, on top of that, these massive investments in data centers. The moratorium conversation is interesting. Will that slow the build out of these? I'm not convinced based on what we've seen so far. And at the end of the day, who's left holding the bag for the massive shareholder returns we're seeing these companies deliver? Right now, it seems to be, commercial and residential electricity ratepayers, which is just another price increase that I think so many of these balance sheets can't take right now.
Wow, I'm glad you went there, Liz. I mean, we've already seen the impact on memory, for instance. Apple's talking to the Chinese about getting cheaper chips so they don't have to hike the price of the iPhone. But does it go beyond that? This massive AI data center spend, which has become a huge issue on the political campaign trail, could send prices of so many things higher, right? Raw materials, lumber, concrete, steel, all are needed to build these enormous complexes.
That's right. I mean, even chemicals like coolants for many of these buildings, piping. We've seen the aluminum market across the globe really in calamity over the past 2 years or so. For the same copper. I think in commodity markets, we're seeing the after effects of all of the tariffs, the war in Iran, supply chain crises made even worse by the fact that one industry is really doing all of the capex right now. And those supply chains are incredibly complicated. They are global in nature. They are very intertwined. There are lots of parts that need to be put together. And I think the big question there is how far can they go before they really hit a wall? Can Apple diversify its supply chains before it runs into the fact that tariffs will need to balance out if they're going to import more from China? I think right now companies are trying to solve for an equation with 1,900 variables that all seem to move every time the president logs on to Truth Social.
Liz, it's great to have you back. Liz Pancotti, Groundwork Collaborative. Let's stay with this data center issue. Tyler, we're going to assemble the political panel in just a moment. Rick and Jeanne will have thoughts on this because we spoke to Ted Cruz about this last evening, of course, the Republican senator from Texas, knowing that Governor Greg Abbott has put some restrictions or at least reviews around proposed data centers in rural areas as opposed to the moratorium put in place in a state like New York. Here's how Cruz sees it should work.
I agree with what Governor Abbott has said, which is no new data center will be built in Texas unless the impact of that data center is zero, is absolutely not 1 penny added to anyone's electricity bills. I think that makes sense. And I'll tell you, I'm urging the companies that are building these data centers go further than that. Make the benefits absolutely clear and indisputable. I'm urging them send checks to the residents of the community. Send them $100 a month, send them $500 a month, send them $1,000 a month, or even better, say, if we build a data center in your community, for the rest of your life, your electricity bill is free. We will pay your electricity bill. That's how you win the PR battle.
Got to tell you, Tyler, it kind of rings true.
Yeah.
No electricity bill for the rest of your life?
Yeah.
All of a sudden, a data center shows up.
We're seeing both parties not have a continuous message on it.
Yep.
It is on both sides of the aisle, Republican and Democratic governors trying to figure this out, and candidates that aren't even in office yet trying to figure this out. Joe, I pulled one poll, a June poll from Reuters. Only 1 in 3 Americans approve of how quickly data centers are going up across the country.
Even those who've never seen one in their lives. Let's get to the political panel. As we mentioned, Bloomberg Politics contributors Jeanne, Zaino, and Rick Davis are with us. Jeanne is our Democratic analyst and democracy visiting fellow at Harvard Kennedy School's Ash Center. Rick is our Republican strategist, of course, and a partner at Stonecourt Capital. What'd you make of that, Jeanne? Is that the future? Nobody has to pay their electric bills anymore. It's open season.
Wouldn't that be nice? I think what struck me, it was such a fascinating interview with Senator Cruz. Number one, he was empathetic to all the concerns, and I think rightly so, as has Governor Abbott and so many governors across the country. But what was stunning to me was when he talked about this as a PR problem. And that, I think, is an indication that they aren't, or he isn't understanding the seriousness with which, in a bipartisan way, communities, whether it's in Salt Lake City, whether it's in Virginia, Texas, New York, around the country, are pushing back. There's so many issues that are of concern to people. Number one has been the lack of transparency in these deals, the fact that many of them have been made under NDAs without public input. I noticed he talked a little bit about, here's an answer to the water problem, this closed loop cooling technologies. Well, anybody who understands those will tell you that increases the energy costs so much. It creates chemical risk concerns, right? So all of these things he's talking about as a PR move, I don't think is addressing the scope and the reality of the concerns that people have in the poll that Tyler just mentioned.
So then, Rick, what is the balancing act here when on the other side of that argument, you have some, including the president, talk about the potential benefits to local communities, such as job growth? How do politicians navigate that divide?
Yeah, I think you're seeing the first step of that, which is trying to address the fear that the public has, because there's a lot of people who just don't understand what the issues are related to data centers themselves, because most of America hasn't seen one, so they haven't experienced it. And two, there's a lot of fear about AI in general, right? What undergirds all of these discussions about data centers is, what's AI going to do to my job? What's AI going to do to our culture? What's AI going to do to the future of our country? And so you create a lot of anxiety. And so addressing that fear and anxiety, I think, is the number one thing. And I think that's what you saw Senator Cruz doing. Nobody's got real answers because they don't really know what the scope of the problem is yet, and especially when it comes to these communities. So a patchwork effort of trying to get sound bites to appease people is simply not going to get it done. It's going to have to be in a conversation that the public officials have with the general public about how to handle this going forward. Do we want to be more competitive with China? Then we're going to have to build data centers. Where we build data centers, what we're going to do. Could you imagine a electricity tax-free zone in your neighborhood in Texas? Where does it start? Where does it stop? You know, can I build a house on one side of the road and get the tax-free status? I mean, we're unleashing a debate that's going to last a long time and have a lot of victims.
Well, okay, and I'll tell you, if it isn't a PR campaign here, Jeannie, you wonder what it is that will win people over beyond buying them off. Axios put together some fascinating stats. There are about, in case you were wondering, there are about 4,000 data centers across the country, 580 hyperscale facilities, at least 75 totaling $130 billion in potential investment impacted in the first quarter of this year. Interesting on the jobs, though, Jeannie. We hear a lot about job creation. That's typically the angle that the president seizes on. About 1,500 workers at the peak are employed to build the data center. That's about 12 to 18 months of construction. You know how many are left to run the data center? This is based on what we've seen in Virginia, where we've had these around for a long time. 50. Is this a job story or not?
It's a job loss story in the long term. And that's another thing that frustrates people. You know, part and parcel of a bigger picture in this is that many Americans are living at a time where they are worried that AI is going to take their jobs, and they are quite frankly sick and tired of tech billionaires telling them how they're going to live their lives. This explains a lot of the pushback on data centers, flock cameras, as we've talked about. I think even the Meta settlement today, these are proxies, and there's real concerns underlying them, but proxies for real anger over tech. And at the core of these issues have to be determined in Congress and by our executive. And that is going to take time. And that's why we do need a pause.
All right. Our political panel, Rick Davis and Jeanne Zaino, they'll be staying with us throughout the hour. Stick it here. This is Bloomberg.
It's 1:21 on Wall Street. We do check markets all day long here at Bloomberg. We've got stocks lower ahead of Nvidia earnings after the close of trading today. Right now, we do have Nvidia shares. They are trading lower by 1.3%. S&P down 5. Little change, down under 0.1%. Still in the red. Dow Industrials down 0.2%. We do have NASDAQ down by 0.2% as well. Bottom line here, stocks are treading water as investors digest the Federal Reserve's preferred inflation gauge as we await numbers out of chip-making giant Nvidia. 10-year currently yielding 4.66%. Gold is down 1.3%, $45.98 the ounce. And West Texas Intermediate crude up 0.3%, $82.62 the barrel on WTI. After earnings right now, Abercrombie & Fitch surging 32%. At Joe Mathieu and Tyler Kendall is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. Charlie Pellet live in New York. He'll be back in just about 20 minutes, as always, with another check on the markets. We're rolling our way up to Nvidia earnings after the closing bell, after 4, which we will be spending a good deal of time focusing on in the late edition of Balance of Power. That starts at 5 p.m. Eastern. We'll have Ed Ludlow and Romaine Bostick with us, digging through the numbers, waiting for the call, and listening to Jensen Huang once he starts speaking. This could help to set the near-term direction, or maybe even the long-term direction for this market right now, obsessed with the AI spend, and of course, the politics surrounding data centers appearing in our program on a daily basis, and we'll have more on that later. Tyler Kendall is with us today in Washington, in for Kaylee Lines. As we consider the latest from the Middle East, and Tyler, there's been some interesting reporting here from Bloomberg as Iran's military says it has reached a revenue-sharing agreement with Oman on the Strait of Hormuz, the very thing that President Trump said would be a non-starter for the U.S.
And we should caution, the IRGC statement related to this does go further than the joint statement that we got from Iran and Oman, which said that this isn't finalized, but it is pointing toward Iran not giving up its leverage when it comes to the Strait of Hormuz, as the U.S. itself is trying to strengthen the economic pressure on Iran to get them to the negotiating
Well, that's right.
table.
You remember economic D-Day. This would be D+2, I guess, if we're keeping track, although many have wondered exactly how this is going to work and what Chinese entities have already been isolated and whether the administration is willing to go further, Tyler, with secondary sanctions. This is all going to be playing out in the days ahead.
Right, exactly, because we know that the U.S. has set out defined timelines for individual countries. And that's where we would like to start by bringing in our next guest, Ophir Falk, foreign policy advisor to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, joins us now live from Israel. Mr. Falk, thank you so much for joining us here on Bloomberg. Let's start there and your thoughts on the U.S.'s economic pressure campaign against Iran. Does Israel feel that this is the next best step in terms of the course of action to get Iran to the negotiating table? And does Israel have a timeline realistically on when you think this will go into full effect?
Well, thanks for having me, Tyler. We're all in favor for what President Trump's doing and the economic D-Day, so to speak. And the way we understand it is that the friend of your enemy is your enemy. And you can't have countries that are facilitating terrorist entities like Iran. And we're all for these sanctions that are going to be put on these countries.
Dr. Falk, it's great to have you with us. For the sake of our viewers and listeners, we should let everyone know that you have been in the room with the Prime Minister for some critical meetings and have been one of his nearest advisors in this process. And so we wonder if the Prime Minister believes that sanctions can achieve what military action has not been able to.
We welcome the sanctions, and we don't see them as mutually exclusive with military actions. I'm sure the president has already said that one thing is for sure: Iran cannot have nuclear weapons. That's what the Prime Minister says. That's what the president says, and that's what's going to happen. So these sanctions are welcome. The Iranian economy is in the gutter. Their inflation, they have hyperinflation. Their currency is as weak as that they've ever been. It's like 2 million rial to $1 US. They have no employment. Their economy is in the gutter, and they're going to be hit. They're going to be hit even further. So those are the conditions. The conditions are being created for this terrible regime, these tyrants in Tehran, to be clobbered.
Will they be hit militarily even further? There's a question about whether the U.S. is, for instance, turning away from military action to focus solely on an economic approach.
Well, again, I think those two things are not mutually exclusive. And the main thing is that Iran cannot have nuclear weapons. That has been made clear by the president. It's been cleared by Israel as well. For my prime minister, made it very clear that deal or no deal, Iran will not have nuclear weapons as long as Prime Minister Netanyahu is prime minister.
Can you give us any insight into what those conversations look like right now between the U.S. and Israel in terms of viable options for military escalation that could be on the table?
Well, I can't get into details, but obviously everything's on the table, and there's zero daylight between the president and the prime minister. There's been great cooperation and coordination throughout the war. I don't think there's ever been a precedent of such great cooperations between a president and a prime minister, or between our armed forces, between the American armed forces and between the Israeli armed forces. The achievements have been incredible, unprecedented. Iran is weaker than it's ever been, and America and Israel are stronger than we've ever been.
Well, part of building the pressure on Iran, given that Iran's economy has taken a hit, though, is the most powerful move would be to have China no longer importing Iranian crude. That's a big question here when it comes to the threatened actions by the U.S. Do you have a sense on what the U.S. is particularly looking for when it comes to China, if a reduction of barrels would be enough, and if Israel is engaged in any diplomacy when it comes to perhaps pressuring China to cut off some of its financial lifelines?
Well, I'm not going to get into American policy, of course. American policy is led by the Americans. But I think would obviously be in the interest of China for Iran to stop terrorizing the world. They're holding the Hormuz Strait as blackmail towards the world. You could only imagine what would happen if they had nuclear weapons. They would blackmail the entire world, and there'd be very little we could do about it. So we acted in the nick of time, and America and Israel did the right thing to put this Iranian regime in its place.
I want to ask you, Dr. Falk, about what's happening or not happening in Gaza. You said in an interview recently that when Hamas says it will disarm, quote, the proof will be in the pudding, unquote. What does proof look like to Israel? And has this boiled down to a who blinks first?
Well, it's very simple, actually. If Hamas wants to disarm, they can disarm in an afternoon. They can just lay down their arms.
Yeah.
Now, the 20-point plan that President Trump introduced almost a year ago called for a 3D model to disarm Hamas, to demilitarize Gaza, and to de-radicalize the Gazans. That is a 3D model that we obviously signed on to. If Hamas wants to disarm, they could do that in an afternoon. That is the next step. And once they do that, we can move forward.
Can you give us an update on where those efforts stand? Where are we in that process toward potentially getting Hamas to disarm?
Well, the IDF Israel currently controls between 60 to 70% of Gaza. And we're demilitarizing that area right now as we speak. The remaining area is unfortunately being controlled to a certain degree by Hamas, and we're fully aligned with the BOP, and more importantly, we're fully aligned with President Trump and Jared Kushner that, number one, we have to disarm Hamas. Hamas needs to put down its arms, and Gaza needs to be demilitarized, either the easy way, by just laying down your arms, which, again, could be done in an afternoon, or it'll be done the hard way. But either way, Hamas is going to be disarmed.
Just lastly, what's the hard way? What could be done that hasn't been already? Gaza looks like the surface of the moon, Doctor.
Well, again, the hard way was what we've been doing for over 2 years. We disarmed over 30,000 Hamas terrorists by taking them out.
Yeah.
And if that's what needs to be done, that's what will be done. We prefer the easy way, for them just to lay down their arms, and that would be over with. That hasn't happened for the past 10 months. They had the easy option of just laying down their arms. I hope they do that. I hope they do what they said they'd do, what they pledged to do, to lay down their arms, to disarm, to demilitarize Gaza, and we could move forward. But if that doesn't happen, again, we're ready to do whatever needs to be done.
He's the foreign policy advisor to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, Dr. Ophir Falk. We appreciate your joining us and sharing your insights with us today on Bloomberg. Let's play it to our political panel. Bloomberg Politics contributors Rick Davis and Jeanne Zaino join us now. Rick is our Republican strategist, a partner at Stonecourt Capital. And Jeanne is our Democratic analyst and democracy visiting fellow at Harvard Kennedy School's Ash Center. What do you think about this, Rick? There are some concerns that this period of time we're in, as the U.S. waits for the economic stranglehold to intensify, that Iran is simply rebuilding, digging out missile sites that we hit, trying to make more missiles and drones for when this turns back into a military action. What do you think?
Joe, I think you're absolutely correct. There's absolutely evidence in the past that after every one of our attacks, there's a rebuilding process that Iran has used to the point where they've been very successful in being able to reconstitute drone capabilities in missile manufacturing and even launch systems that had been at one point destroyed. So we can assume that in this period of time, the risk that the administration's taken is that we can bring Iran to heel economically, even while they rebuild their arms capability. And that is a threat to both the U.S., the Persian Gulf, and to Israel, obviously, and our allies around the region. So it is a gamble. And I don't think that anybody is taking it lightly in regard to what kind of capability Iran will have if this period extends and the economic sanctions over the course of the next few months don't bite.
Jeanne, to pick up on the headline that crossed the terminal earlier today, Iran and Oman, according to the IRGC, are nearing a finalization of a pact to oversee traffic in the Strait of Hormuz, which would include fees. Is that going to prompt the administration to have to take an even harder stance when it comes to getting Iran to the negotiating table? Because that seems to indicate that we're moving in the other direction.
Yeah, absolutely, Tyler. It's moving in the wrong direction. And what does the administration do about it? We've tried a military campaign. We tried a naval blockade. We tried an MOU. We are now trying this D-Day, economic D-Day. There's various reasons that none of those are going to work, including the economic D-Day, because you would have to get China, Russia, Turkey, Pakistan, and all of Iran's trading neighbors and friends to disassociate. And that is, we've heard already, not in the offing. So what do we do then? And that's the problem. And I think it's fascinating in your conversation that he was talking about the fact there's no daylight between the United States or the president and the prime minister. I think that's interesting because he also said that the economic efforts are not mutually exclusive, keeping open the idea of military campaign. And that is something that the president clearly does not want to try to engage in again.
All right, our political panel today, Rick Davis, partner at Stonecourt Capital, and Jeanne Zaino, democracy visiting fellow at Harvard Kennedy School's Ash Center, both Bloomberg Politics contributors. Thank you both for joining us, and stick with us. We'll have more up ahead, including the latest from the campaign trail. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio.
It's 1:40 on Wall Street. We do check markets all day long here at Bloomberg. I'm Charlie Pella. We've got NASDAQ 100 index back in the green, just turning higher. Little change, but higher by 6 points right now. The NASDAQ 100 index being led higher by Lumentum, Western Digital, and ARM Holdings. S&P 500 index lower. Little change, still in the red, but off-session lows down 2 points right now. We're essentially in a holding pattern, treading water ahead of Nvidia earnings after the close of trading. Nvidia right now is trading lower. Nvidia down by 1.4%. Dow Industrials down 0.2%. NASDAQ down 0.2%. But again, the S&P is a baseline, just about flat on the day. The SOX, the Philadelphia Semiconductor Index, it is up now. Little change, but up under 0.1%. The 2-year 4.22%. Investors are digesting this morning's Federal Reserve's preferred inflation guide, personal consumption index. Right now, we do have the Russell 2000 index down 0.2%. 10-year at 4.66%, the 30-year 5.18%, again the 2-year 4.22%. Gold is down $57 the ounce to $45.99, drop there of 1.2%. West Texas Intermediate crude up 0.3%, 82.64 a barrel. Brent lower by 0.2, 88.43. Nvidia earnings, as we mentioned, coming up after the close of trading, down 1.4%. We'll also hear from CrowdStrike and Salesforce. CrowdStrike up 2.3%, and Salesforce right now down 0.6%. Joe Mathieu and Tyler Kendall, that is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Okay, my friend Charlie Pellet live in New York. He'll be back in about 20 minutes, 2 p.m. Eastern time as we kick off Bloomberg Business Week Daily. Charlie watching Nvidia just like we all are throughout the day here. And I know I've said it a few times, but you can trust we'll have a lot more after the bell with Nvidia earnings popping alongside Salesforce, alongside CrowdStrike. It's going to be a busy post-market session here at the tail end of earnings reporting season. We'll have much more in the late edition of Balance of Power that starts every weekday at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. Alongside Tyler Kendall, I will be here, Joe Mathieu, watching all three of these move for better or worse in the after-hours session. We're picking up the pieces after another election day, though. This was a little different. These were primary runoffs. None more important, we're told, than South Carolina. With the Trump endorsement on the line, Tyler, it worked out pretty well for him in not only South Carolina, but also Oklahoma.
The president has a relatively strong track record when it comes to these primary endorsements.
Yeah.
I wanted to point out some new stats came in from the super PAC that supports him. $830,000 were spent in order to help boost Darlene Graham, the sister of the late Senator Lindsey Graham.
I think it was a total of about $6 million with outside groups added, but that was some of the first MAGA Inc. money that had been spent at all in the campaign. And of course, he's the one who asked her to run, so there was a bit on the line here. And we're joined by someone who knows a bit about the Carolinas. Patrick McHenry is with us, Bloomberg Politics contributor, of course, former Republican congressman from North Carolina, former House Financial Services Committee chairman, former Speaker Pro Tem. Mr. Chairman, welcome back.
Great to be back.
So everyone in the media likes to try to blow holes in this idea. The Trump endorsement, it finally hit the wall, and we've done this one race at a time and one state by state. South Carolina, Oklahoma worked out well, and he put a lot on the line for Darlene Graham. Why did he expose himself like that? And did we learn anything about the status of the Trump brand?
Loyalty to Lindsey Graham was one of the reasons. And the president had deep affection for Lindsey Graham. That very complicated relationship and how they started. But and number one. Number two, they wanted a loyalist elected to the Senate. And number three, South Carolina is a bulwark of Trump support. Yeah. So the combination of Lindsey Graham's popularity in the state and Donald Trump's popularity in the state elected Darlene Graham, who was Lindsey Graham's sister, unrelated to politics. She, a year ago, no one knew her. Right. 4 months ago, no one had heard of her. Ralph Norman, who made the runoff against her, it's been a long-time policy, elected official, Freedom Caucus leader in the U.S. House, very outspoken, critic of, well, a lot of things. But he was much more loyal to the Freedom Caucus than he was to President Trump. Yeah. Okay. And President Trump wanted to show that he still has power and capacity within the Republican Party. He clearly does.
Well, and the president actually posted about the Congressman Ralph Norman this morning, talking about his endorsement of Nikki Haley. That's so right. It appeared that this might have been a few years in the making in terms of who the president may have backed in this race.
Ralph was a rare opponent of President Trump in South Carolina among elected officials. And while Ralph Norman may have forgotten about his endorsement of Nikki Haley, President Trump did not. And so these, what we're finding out is much like NASCAR. I'm a big NASCAR fan growing up in North Carolina. And what you'll find out about these race drivers is that they will talk about a feud that is a decade old, right? Yeah. Professional wrestling, stock car drivers, and President Trump, they will remember the slight from years and years ago.
No doubt. Does that mean you were at IndyCar, or did you boycott IndyCar because you're a NASCAR guy?
It was a great event. Yeah, but no, like the Indy product is not as good as the NASCAR
it's not
product.
as good.
Not in my view.
Fantastic.
But top ratings for Indy here in D.C., the best viewership of Indy, one of the best racing viewerships of any race in the United States. It's really amazing product that happened.
I was indoctrinated on Sunday. I'm a baby. I don't know anything about that. I'm from Connecticut. What the heck do I know? But I was fascinated and blown away by the whole thing. And being on Pennsylvania Avenue in this environment, I'm wondering about the politics behind this. That was the final peg in a series of events. Started with the UFC fight. You weren't there for that, were you?
No, I was not.
I bet you were invited. We had the big air shows, all the flybys, the Guinness Book fireworks, now IndyCar. Is there an impact on the voter? The way they look at Donald Trump, the sort of bare-chested America 250, what does that do politically?
It doubles down on his brand and who he is. He believes in America, the strength of America, the capacity of America. And what better way to express it than the 250th anniversary? Those that are opposing him or opposing these events look like they're anti-American. So what a great setup. when he's trying to show off America, show off our capital city, and make improvements to our capital city. And for people to fight him about cleaning up fountains or putting up statues or having events like this, they look silly, because what he's trying to do is really show off, just like Rome at its height, show off through games who we are in this capacity. It's a very pro-America, America first.
Well, Rome at its height, though, was the prelude to...
Well, I said it for a reason.
Oh, God.
It does have a double-edged sword to it. It's a complicated message.
Wow. With reference to narrow. Take it away, Tyler.
I'm going to try to tie all these together, but also move our conversation
back on track,
forward. Okay.
Sorry for everything.
Well, if we go to the Oklahoma race yesterday, part of what we're all talking about right now is building up America, American ingenuity, America 250. Part of the race that we saw yesterday in Oklahoma, President Trump in part didn't back the candidate that lost over reported opposition to an aluminum smelter plant.
That's right.
This week, President Trump ramped up the tariff tit-for-tat escalation with Canada. We get a huge amount of aluminum from Canada, I think to the tune of like 50% of what's consumed in this country. How is this going to play if we bring this back to domestic politics in the midterm elections as we ramp up the trade war? But it also goes to the president's point that you need to bolster domestic manufacturing to have the U.S. be less reliant on other countries for critical materials like this.
The complicated thing is returning supply chains here to the United States does have an inflationary impact, right? You have a temporary lag in the ability to build up domestic manufacture when you're cutting off a foreign supplier. That complicates the inflation picture for the Fed, makes things complicated going into a midterm election. Stepping back, one aperture from the direct trade war with Canada, which is an avoidable disaster in my opinion, taking back one aperture of this, you have the AI build-out, the AI revolution, this reshoring back to the United States, and the president's deregulatory agenda and tax agenda. There are huge lifts for the American economy. Yeah. And at the same time, we have a trade war that is a huge headwind to us and to the American people. You have American people experiencing inflation, and we don't like it. Then you have the Iran war and the effect on energy prices in the United States and globally. Imagine what this economy would be doing but for tariffs and Iran. It would be at an all-time tear. And instead, we have to have the Treasury intervene with long-term rates in order to manipulate the economy for short-term gain. So this, the economic question here, the voters will speak on this in November. This midterm Republican convention in Dallas in a couple of weeks will be a question of trying to reset what the American people are experiencing, but it is certainly a very complicated and challenging picture to try to paint. It's a very complicated thing for politicians to paint a positive picture about the economy right now.
Just as the market wakes up to the federal debt for some reason. This has been wild. You talked about the intervention at the Treasury, but $40 trillion set off alarm bells for some reason in a way that $39.9 trillion did not. And I talked yesterday about all of this with your old friend Kevin Brady, the former congressman from Texas, the chair of House Ways and Means. Here's what he had to say.
I think getting fiscal policy right is the only solution here. It's not going to come from the Fed. It will not come from the Treasury or any administration, frankly. It's going to have to come from Congress. Setting guardrails around spending, putting in place enforceable spending caps. And over time, you're not going to fix this problem immediately, but over time, right-sizing that government in a way that markets, more importantly, the country feels more secure.
Kevin Brady is an old-style Republican, and what he's saying makes a lot of sense, but, I mean, this comes with a big eye roll. You're going to tell us next about a blue ribbon panel? How do we manage this on the Hill?
Oh, no, you have to actually do something about the national debt. You have to do something about our annual deficit.
Yes.
Congress has done nothing about this since before the financial crisis, since the Bush second term, where we had a deficit that it was actually 1/10 the size it is currently. This is the annual deficit.
Right.
And so there are a couple things that have hit the market. One is it's clear the politicians don't care about this.
Yes.
We have a Democratic Party that wants to spend more and isn't really talking about serious tax increases to fund it. One. Two, we have Republicans that are not a fiscal conservative. They're no longer a fiscally conservative party, if they ever were. They're more of a populist party. And no populist party in the world cares about debt and deficits.
Wants to cut.
They don't. They want to enjoy the high times right now. So you have that. You also have the Fed signaling clearly we're no longer going to monetize the debt, which they have done since the financial crisis, which has enabled Congress to look the other way. Right. And third, you have this AI revolution that has required gobs of money, tens of billions of dollars for this build-out. So how do you prioritize yourself? To fund something that is a broken system, or to fund the next thing that can unleash
you just
the next generation?
All the dots today.
But then what's the tipping point? When voters tell lawmakers they have to start paying attention?
Yes. I talked the last time I had a town hall meeting about the debt and deficit was in 2010. And they rolled their eyes and they said, let's talk about something else. I had great charts too. And my staff said I'd stop bringing the charts, right?
Wow.
And so the voters have not prioritized this, but it is heart disease, right?
That's right.
This is not a problem until there's a cataclysmic
It's amazing we haven't had a heart attack.
Yes, truly.
We're getting the warning signs.
Yes.
So you go to Dallas and you have to deliver a message at the Dallas convention at the same time America's watching football. Did you see this?
Terrible
the 9th
scheduling.
and the 10th. J.D. Vance is speaking the same time Patriots-Seahawks Super Bowl rematch. Trump is up against the 49ers Rams the night after. The tree that falls in the woods?
So this is exactly what you're talking about with what is Trump trying to say with this 250th anniversary of America.
Yeah.
Right? Strong, hurrah, America.
Yeah.
Who are those people? They're going to be watching the NFL,
football game.
Right?
He should be doing an interview at halftime.
It would be far better. Far better. So this is going to be hard programming, and it's going to be very difficult to break through on a night like that when live sports are still, the dominant player on evening programming.
Should we expect anything monumental that he could say that would make people want to change the channel and tune in?
Never count him down.
Yeah, right.
Never
or at
count
least
him
look
out.
back at Twitter the next morning, right?
You still you have no idea what he can bring. And I think his staff is like cooking things up, but he's certainly cooking things up separate from his staff.
Are you going?
Does. Not if I don't have to.
Okay. That's what every reporter in Washington said as well, I think.
Unfortunately, it will be something could be something interesting, and likely will be.
You wonder if it's a new thing. Maybe both parties do midterm every time we have
Republicans need it to juice the Trump electorate to come out and potentially save at least the Senate, if not narrow the House minority.
I bet we'll be talking to this man that week. Patrick McHenry, Bloomberg Politics contributor. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, as always. Tyler and I will be back. Late edition of Balance of Power.